India was falling apart. India was going into a crisis mode continuously. And that has been going on since the time the British left the country. So India has been on a path to degradation for the last 76 years. So these are small hiccups about the outcome of elections. But the fact remains that India is falling apart. It's getting worse by the day. And it does not matter who controls the country. Modi is I don't like him at all, but he's just a symptom of the underpinning cultural problem to do with the country. Now, people usually ask me, how does he not being in majority matter to the country? You really have to understand one cultural underpinning of Indian society, and the cultural underpinning is that India has no concept of honor. There's no concept of contracts. There's no concept of friendship. There's no concept of individuality and respect for what you agree with. So your friends and families are your actually biggest enemies.
大家好，这里是世界说中国。今天这期内容，说实话有点炸。主持人是一位印度有名的地缘政治分析师大卫·瓦拉卢博士。他请来了一位在西方金融圈非常有名的印度投资人 Jayant Bhandari。 这位老哥的背景也是很精彩，他其实是个有志之士，在美国发财了之后回印度投资建厂，想回报家乡，结果被坑得差点破产，后来又来中国投资挣了不少，所以他就成了印度政府或者说是整个印度制度最大的喷子，甚至早期说过印度就是粪坑这句话。他经常拿中国和印度对比，说两国之间没得比，尤其是经商环境。实际上他也的确是最有资格说这句话的人，但问题是这场采访的重点不是投资，也不是市场，而是他对印度这个国家本身的判断。他直接给出了一个非常尖锐的结论，印度不是发展问题，而是结构性问题，甚至在他看来，这个国家正在持续走向衰退。更夸张的是，他不仅批评政治，还直接把矛头指向了文化层面。他说印度的问题不在莫迪，不在某一个政党，而在于整个社会缺乏契约精神，缺乏信任结构，甚至缺乏最基本的合作逻辑。换句话说，他的意思是换谁上台都没用。而接下来更具争议的是他对印度和中国的对比评价，几乎是完全两个世界的结论。有人听完说他是说了实话，也有人直接认为他彻底放弃印度。那我们先别急着下结论，直接进入这段访谈。
Hello, David. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. You are now a friend of the show. Anytime I mention you, everybody's like, please bring him back in. And I always promise the community that I am going to be bringing you. And then usually you travel around the world a lot. And I always tell them, hey, that depends on his schedule. When he's available, he lets me know. And usually we do it. So anyway, very, very excited to have you here because I like to get your feedback, inputs, and insights, analysis, whatever term you want to use, about the recent outcome elections in India. Now, those elections, in my opinion, have shaken the trajectory now for the country, which is the most populous nation on earth here, except now we're going to be seeing something different. And the question I would like to start with is, who's going to be controlling Modi right now, since his party doesn't have majority?
Well, firstly, David, I don't think the trajectory of India has changed because of this election. India was falling apart. India was going into a crisis mode continuously. And that has been going on since the time the British left the country. So India has been on a path to degradation for the last 76 years. So these are small hiccups about the outcome of elections. But the fact remains that India is falling apart. It's getting worse by the day. And it does not matter who controls the country. Modi is I don't like him at all, but he's just a symptom of the underpinning cultural problem to do with the country. Now, people usually ask me, how does he not being in majority matter to the country? You really have to understand one cultural underpinning of Indian society, and the cultural underpinning is that India has no concept of honor. There's no concept of contracts. There's no concept of friendship. There's no concept of individuality and respect for what you agree with. So your friends and families are your actually biggest enemies.
Wow.
That is why people hide their gold in the ground without telling their own family members, and they erect huge high walls around their houses, because if you don't, then the neighbor will shift the fence overnight. So you have to understand that this is a country without honor. This is a country where you can trust absolutely no one. And the people closest to you are your biggest enemies.
Yeah. What about the people? What about the Indian people? I mean, I know some people in India that, you know, they are educated, but they have no sort of opportunities for employment because the government is not creating this. The government is not sort of taking care of infrastructure and so forth. So what happened to the people? Isn't the government supposed there to sort of, Modi in this case, he's been in power over almost 2 decades now, 14 years to be exact. What has he achieved economically speaking that we can talk of?
Well, he cannot achieve anything, David. I usually like to say that in an organization of 2 people in India, there's 1 person too many. People can't organize in that country. People can't trust each other in that country. And people are completely unskilled. If I need a plumber in San Francisco, I call someone in to do my repair job. If I need a plumber in India, I might need to pay him only a couple of dollars to do my job, but he will create 3 more problems or maybe 5 more new problems for me before he leaves. So I'm better off doing my plumbing job myself in India. And that is what I actually do. So the problem is that Indians are responsible for the status quo. And that is why I always say that Modi is just a symptom of the problem. Modi is not the problem of the country. Neither is Modi the solution of the country's problem. The core problem is Indians are irrational and they don't have the moral fabric. They don't have the honor system. And that is why India will continue to degrade irrespective of which party is in power in that country.
And yet Western analysts are saying, well, the economy of India is going to sort of be, as a matter of fact, I heard some Western think tanks saying that the economy now of India, it will be considered like the 3rd in the world. And I was like, hold on a second. Where are you guys coming up with these statements from? And even one of our viewers in the channel here wrote, his name is Connie Lee, 9678. He wrote, and I quote here, Dr. David, the Indian government has been claiming for each of the last few years that its GDP growth is higher than that of every other country. What would be a way of verifying the calculations of their figure, which sound a bit dubious? End of quote. What do you think, Jahan?
Well, it doesn't matter, David. Even if you consider Indian GDP growth to be 10%, and let's assume that for mathematical purpose to be 10%, it is erroneous to compare GDP growth of a country with GDP per capita of $2,500 with a country whose GDP per capita might be $60,000. So if the United States with $60,000 per capita GDP grows at 1%, it adds $600 per year to its per capita GDP. Whereas if India adds 10% to its per capita GDP, it only adds $250 to its per capita GDP, which means that India would still be growing at half as much pace as the US would be growing with its much relatively insignificant percentage-wise GDP growth. The issue is, David, and we learned this in the middle school, that you cannot compare percentage with percentages unless the baseline is similar. You can't compare the growth rate of a mouse with a growth rate of an elephant. And that is what the error these big economists do. A lot of them are actually empty suits, and they really are naive and illiterate on cultural basis. They don't really understand that there's a difference between people around the world. The religions are different, cultures are different. They just look at graphs and think that every country would eventually follow the way China or South Korea did.
I mean, I even read somewhere when it says that it's going to overtake. The Indian economy is going to overtake that of China. I was like, what?
Well,
it's ridiculous.
So 24 hours back, I was in China, David. I spent a lot of time in China. We invest in China through the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. I love China. China and India are not comparable at all. If you wanted me to move to China and live there, I would very, very happily do so. I get freedom in China. I get conveniences, comfort, and facilities in China. If you wanted me to move to live in India, I will shoot myself. That is how different the two countries are. You should not even be comparing India with China. China is a sane country. China is a rational country. You can have a decent existence in China. You cannot have a decent existence in India. I like to say, David, without any exaggeration, that Indians live lives of cultures. They live and die like. That's what you see. The moment you land in India, things are chaotic. People don't really have a sane big.
看完这段访谈，其实最有意思的不只是他说印度发展慢，而是他压根不把这当成一个发展速度问题。在他的逻辑里，这不是快一点慢一点的差别，而是一个社会能不能建立信任、规则以及稳定合作机制的问题。说的更直白一点，就是在他眼里，有些国家是在升级系统，而有些国家可能连系统都没装好。当然，这种说法肯定是非常有争议的，甚至可以说是极端的。但它之所以传播得快，不是因为它一定正确，而是因为它击中了一个很现实的传播点。当一个国家的发展叙事和个体体验产生巨大落差时，人们就会开始寻找极端解释。不过，如果我们跳出情绪来看，这段访谈真正值得思考的地方，其实不在于谁更好，而在于一个更冷静的问题：一个国家的发展到底是靠 GDP 增长率，还是靠社会内部的信任密度？如果只看数字，所有国家都在增长，但如果看结构，有些国家是在往上跑，有些国家是在内部磨损。所以这类观点最容易让人不舒服，但也最容易让人停下来思考，因为它其实在问一个更现实的问题：当增长不再等于进步时，我们到底该用什么标准去判断一个国家的未来？说白了，这种访谈最刺激的地方不在于答案，而在于它把很多人习惯性忽略的问题直接摊在桌面上了。至于你认不认同，那就是另外一回事了。